The following video is a re-edit of my Young Guns review. I reviewed Young Guns about a year or two ago, and I liked the review and everything, but it got blocked in a few territories, and it didn't really get the coverage that I wanted it to get. Now, as I'm gearing up to do Young Guns Part 2, I figured maybe a little re-edit of this to kind of get rid of those copyright blocks might be in order, and to get more eyes on it. So without further ado, this video, which was originally published in September of 2022, has undergone a re-edit, and, you know, try and enjoy it, I guess. The Western genre has had a lot of ups and downs throughout the years. It is one of the oldest subject matters in film history. In fact, the first ever Western film drama was a short film made in the UK titled Kidnapping by Indians. It's kind of fucked up that this was made in 1899 when the Old West, well on its way out, was still a thing. The genre existed since the pioneer era, and while it's sort of calming down today, filmmakers every so often will make one, but let's be real, the genre was done to death for decades. One could say that it peaked in the 50s and 60s with actors like Lee Marvin, John Wayne, and Clint Eastwood, just to name a few. And while it continued into the 70s, westerns took a backseat to other action genres such as kung fu movies, spy thrillers, and cop movies. The 1980s was even more harsh on the genre. The cop and spy thriller movies still remain, and kung fu movies still had a niche, but then you had science fiction, adventure, action movies, and of course the Cold War-centric military badass action movies. So westerns really kind of fell from the grace at which they once stood. Western movies wouldn't gain any sort of renewed interest until the early 90s with Unforgiven and Tombstone, but there is one Western movie from the late 1980s that I have seen a lot of in my years, and I'm going to talk about it today, and that is Young Guns. Imagine the concept of the historical story of Billy the Kid and the Regulators taken, somewhat fictionalized, and then cast with members of the Brat Pack. Emilio Estevez, Kiefer Sutherland, and Charlie Sheen, and then the cast rounded up with fucking Lou Diamond Phillips, Terrence Stamp, Terry O'Quinn, Jack Palance, Dermot Mulroney, and others. Sounds like a recipe for success to me. For those who don't know, like the four of you, Billy the Kid was a notorious Old West outlaw who had a rather fabled history. Fabled as in a lot of it was built on legend and hearsay. Don't get me wrong, the shit they have been able to confirm point to no other direction besides bad motherfucker. The Old West is full of bad motherfuckers, but Billy the Kid was not only a bad motherfucker, he was actually a devious sociopath on top of that. He would purposely dress like a dork and act effeminate to goad people into fucking with them. He was violent and impulsive, literally the worst combination a person can be in a region with, at the time, little to no law enforcement. Now, Young Guns does take a few creative liberties. Names are switched around, some figures are left out or heavily altered, the true events are fictionalized and sometimes romanticized, but it gets the broad strokes right. I'm not a history YouTuber, so I won't go into anything unless it's really inaccurate or perfectly accurate. Young Guns covers the early formation of Billy the Kid and the Regulators, and is a retelling of their story up until the end of the Lincoln County War in New Mexico from the late 1800s. I really do like the opening credits sequence a lot. It has that kind of 1930s moving pictures quality to it. It introduces all the actors in a very stylized manner, and the score in this movie is fucking stellar. Like, it starts off with that more traditional Western thing, and then just boom, hits you with the fucking synthesizers and the guitars, which I wouldn't think in a million years that those would work in a Western movie, but Anthony Marinelli did a very good job, along with Brian Banks. Anthony Marinelli did the synth work for Michael Jackson's Thriller and has done a lot of film scores over the years. I actually like this score so much that I have some tracks from it on my Spotify. The film opens with John Tunstall, played by Terrence Stamp, and Doc Scurlock, played by Kiefer Sutherland, going into town when they see a group of lawmen chasing after a youth who stole from them. Tunstall decides to take the boy in and allows him to stay at his ranch if he does a bit of farm work. Now, this is the first inaccuracy I want to get to. The young kid is clearly Billy the Kid, played by Emilio Estevez. John Tunstall was actually only a couple years older than Billy the Kid. They make him older in the movie to give him more of a father figure dynamic with the other Regulators, and I can see why they did that, so this bit of artistic license will go without being bashed on. We meet the rest of the Regulators, and they're called the Regulators because as they regulate Tunstall's land and protect it from anybody infringing on it. Doc is the smarter one, Dirty Steve is a dumb redneck, Dick Brewer is sort of the leader of the group, Charlie's the most boring fucking character in the movie, and then there's Jose Chavez, the half-native, half-Mexican of the group, played by a Filipino guy, which, I don't know what to make of this one, so I'm just gonna hold my tongue. I didn't notice this at first, but on a rewatch, it kinda clicked with me that they really did lay out the deceptiveness of Billy the Kid as a person early on. When they first arrive at the camp, he acts like an uneducated moron.
Who are them?
They, William? Who are they?
And is stuck doing menial tasks around the farm, like feeding the pig. Later on, during a reading and writing lesson, Billy reveals that he is rather literate, and yeah, I don't know if this part is true, but it makes for a cool reveal that Billy the Kid isn't a simpleton, but that he's manipulative and cunning to the point that he'll act stupid to manipulate you and get the upper hand in any potential conflict. Get to meet the film's antagonist, Murphy, played by fucking Jack Palance, an Irish Catholic cattle baron who has a feud with Tunstall over territory and a contract with the government. There's so many layers to this feud historically that aren't really explored in this movie and that I have no desire to go into, but they certainly tip things onto the side of Tunstall being the good guy for this movie. The easiest way to compare the Old West to something modern is to compare, cattle barons to crime lords. To the best of my understanding, cattle was a hot commodity in the Old West, and people would be fucking killed over it. Business would be sabotaged, and while the goods weren't illegal, some of the means competitors would use to get over on other competitors were illegal, or at least unethical, which led to cattle barons hiring outlaws to fight other outlaws that the other cattle barons hired. I can't even do it justice. Like I said, I'm not a historian, but the fact that Tunstall is painted as this honest businessman who wants to help wayward youth kind of bugs me when, even with what little I have researched, it all pointed to the fact that at the end of the day, he was just another cattle baron like the rest. He utilized the resources that all the others utilized, he just didn't have the traction. But anyway, for the sake of the movie, Murphy's bad, Tunstall's good, and also Alex McSween, played by Terry Quinn, is Tunstall's lawyer and is portrayed as trying to help Tunstall get over on Murphy. But in actuality, the whole thing was a lot more shady, with McSween being accused of embezzling money from Murphy's operation. One of my favorite parts of this film is the dinner scene where Charlie and Steve are insulting Billy.
Apologies, William. Just hacking on you, that's all.
And when they bring up that Billy killed a man and ask him why,
Yeah, Billy, what you kill him for?
He was hacking on me.
I fucking love that. I think what makes Billy the Kid as a historical figure or a fucking film character so interesting is that he was apparently crazy and unpredictable. Hell, he might have even been lying here, but would you want to find out if he wasn't? Nah, he was, and it is kind of funny to see Tunstall, who's usually stoic, crack a little smile at Billy's little practical joke. So we get a little montage of Tunstall culturing Billy, buying him fancy clothes and whatnot, and we get to see more of Billy's unpredictable and impulsive nature. And we have a good old-fashioned New Year's shindig where Doc sees an Asian girl and realizes he has a crippling case of racial fetishism. He has a dance with her and realizes that Murphy apparently took the girl from a Chinese laundry that fucked up his shirt. Human trafficking's fucking great. Following the shindig, the boys are all riding with Tunstall, and when the regulators, ride on ahead all fast and cowboy-like and shit, Tunstall is surrounded by Murphy's men and is shot to death. Now, it's a little more eventful in real life than what they depicted in the movie. Apparently, Tunstall and the group were ambushed by deputies, there was a bit more of a struggle, and it's contested whether or not Tunstall surrendered or tried to fight back. He apparently got his head blown off, and the press at the time said he was resisting. Either way, they simplify it here just to get to the next point of the movie, which that's fine. The regulators, now out for revenge for the death of Tunstall, get deputized and start trying to bring in the men responsible, and we get a bit of a conflict between Dick Brewer and Billy over who the real leader of the group is. Brewer wants to bring all the perpetrators to face justice, but Billy seems more interested in just killing everyone involved. We also start to see more of Billy's psychotic side when he ambushes one of Murphy's men and shoots him dead before stuffing the arrest warrant in his mouth. I love how fast everything starts to break down during the next confrontation with Murphy's men, where it's revealed that McCloskey, who was introduced earlier as someone who left Murphy's group and joined Tunstall's group, is a spy for Murphy. Nobody else sees it, but Billy takes note when McCloskey deliberately tries to steer the group away from one route and towards another one, possibly for an ambush. It's a tense scene and it's actually pretty fucking brutal. You don't really see heads getting blown off a lot in Western movies, but they did this scene really well, and in reality, McCloskey wasn't a spy for Murphy, but he was a friend of one of the men that the group was about to execute and tried to stick up for him, and then Billy just kind of blew his brains out, and yes, this scene is relatively accurate, at least in what it shows, compared to history. Following this incident, the regulators find themselves on the run as outlaws, pondering their next move while hiding in the mountains. Chavez finds some peyote, and the boys get completely fucked out of their gourd. This is one of the most memorable scenes in the movie. Doc has this fucking monologue about Sun Yan and how she's his flower and he's her butterfly. Dirty Steve is just completely fucked up and fumbling around with his shotgun, exclaiming,
"Did you see this president cocking through the goddamn bill?"
I've never done peyote, but my god, if anybody has, is this like accurate? Like, everything about this scene is great. The distorted voices, Charlie puking, because apparently on peyote, I don't know if this is true, but I heard someone say the more you puke, the harder you trip. It's just a riot. Now, I didn't catch on if the whole thing is Dick didn't do the peyote because he's not acting all zany and he seems kind of judgmental. Maybe I missed this detail. But anyway, the group decides to find a place to hide out and they pass a bunch of natives while still kind of tripping balls on peyote. I like that this movie does portray the natives as sympathetic. A lot of earlier Western movies usually portrayed natives as violent antagonistic figures, and I'm sure there were some natives that were outright hostile towards outsiders, but here, these natives are just vibing. Okay, so right here is one of my two favorite parts of the movie. The regulators are hiding out at Blazer's Mill, an abandoned mill, when they're met by a man named Buckshot Roberts, who, in their words,
He's killed more people than smallpox.
you're expecting some huge, big, epic standoff, but nah, Buckshot Roberts basically is just straight to the point. He wants the bounty on all of them.
Let's dance.
Prior to this scene, they were teasing some dissension between Dick and Billy. They were fighting for the dominance of being the leader of the group. But Buckshot Roberts fucks them hard. This is probably the best action scene in the movie because the regulators do not look heroic at all. They get fucking spanked. Chavez and Doc get wounded, and when Roberts ducks into an outhouse and gets fucking blasted, Billy encourages Dick to go check and see if he's dead, and Dick gets fucking shot. Can't help but think Billy did this knowing full well Dick would get killed as a ploy to kind of just remove him and solidify himself as the man in charge of the regulators. Just how this scene is shot and how it plays out is perfect in my opinion. It's fast-paced and to the point, but it really captures how being in a situation like that would be. And the music they use when fucking Dick gets killed is just like, wow. Again, Anthony Marinelli is a great composer. Everything here happens so fast, but it feels like an eternity. And now, because this is one of my favorite scenes, I feel I should talk about the historical truth behind it. The actual shootout played out more or less the same as it did in history, with a few names changed around due to the absence of certain figures from the real story in this film. However, in real life, Roberts was not the aggressor. In real life, Buckshot Roberts sold his ranch and was trying to leave New Mexico when he went to Blazer's Mills to collect his check. And it was at that point that Buckshot Roberts realized that the regulators were eating lunch and everything kind of went to shit. Now, I'm sure the details of the actual gunfight are fictionalized, but cross-referencing them with the events, it played out similar enough. In real life, Buckshot Roberts actually won the fight technically because he caused the regulators to retreat, much like in the movie, but he later died of his wounds. In the movie, we don't actually get to see what happened to Buckshot Roberts after, if he survived or not, which adds mystique to his badass of a character. Doc breaks into Murphy's house to talk to Yun Sen, and we have some romantic shit, and I don't know how accurate this is. I'm sure this is more fictionalized, but Doc somehow comes off as creepier than Murphy. Okay, nah, but still, it's awkward and it's kind of shoehorned in, I guess, to give any women dragged to this movie a romantic plot to follow. It's not a terrible romantic subplot, it's just not the strongest part of the film. We get a pretty good monologue from Chavez after Billy questions him about how much he cared about Tunstall and getting back at Murphy. Basically, it turns out Murphy's men wiped out his entire tribe after selling them bad meat. Like, it's pretty brutal what the fuck he describes here, like, ugh.
My sisters were just babies, and they had their heads bashed in with boot heels so that the army could save bullets!
This eventually leads to the group killing Sheriff Brady and then hiding out in Mexico, leading to the second of my favorite two scenes in the movie. In the little village that they're hanging out in, there's a saloon that they, frequent, and, big mouth Texas bounty hunter is gumming off about looking for Billy the Kid. Billy, being in the establishment, pulls the greatest fucking troll of the Old West when he goes up to the guy pretending to be just some kid and asks,
Are you really gonna kill Billy the Kid?
and we get this whole exchange where the guy is just gumming off. Billy has to see his gun, and while the guy is distracted by a woman, he slips a few of the bullets out of the cylinder. The way Billy just fucks with the guy is fucking legendary. Everything from pretending to aim the gun at him to saying,
Hey, I see him. Right there, don't you see him?
up until he whistles his ballad, which the bounty hunter had earlier said was a trait of Billy the Kid. It's just comic gold, and it ends with the bounty hunter trying to kill him, but hey, his gun's empty. I absolutely fucking love this scene. It is just so perfect. It really drives the point home that Billy the Kid was a great gunslinger, but he was also a manipulative genius. I hate to make this comparison because it makes me sound like an embarrassing man-child, but Billy the Kid was a lot like the Joker in that he would play these horrible tricks on people that usually ended with them getting killed, and he'd just laugh about it. And the best part of this is that this scene actually did happen in real life. The circumstances and the timing of the event are a little different from how it's portrayed in film. It happened after the Lincoln County War, but Billy the Kid actually fucking did this to someone, and that is fucking hilarious. Just imagine what was going through that dude's head for the last few seconds he was alive.
That their gun killed Ed Rollins.
Is that right?
Hey, barkeep.
After being the most unremarkable character in the movie, we actually do get more development on Charlie. He sees a hooker and all he wants to do is hold her, and this may seem weird because it's kind of out of left field after Charlie got like no development at all, but the movie actually has a fair amount of content that was cut out of the final picture. Some of that content would have explained that the hooker was his estranged mother, or that he had mother issues or some shit. And during this point in time, we also get a funny scene where Billy is writing a letter to the governor of New Mexico trying to get a pardon, and it goes, exactly how you think it would go. Charlie later gets married, and during the ceremony, Pat Garrett, who Billy met earlier at the New Year's shindig, tells him that Murphy and his deputies are planning to ambush McSween at his house and hang him. So the regulators decide to go protect McSween, but of course Pat Garrett is a piece of shit, and it turns out this is all a ruse to get all the regulators in one place and bring them to justice or kill them. This somewhat tense gunfight with more classic Billy the Kid.
I see you got Charlie Crawford down there with you.
Yeah, we got a whole lot of... Oh my God!
Damn!
Hey, Pepin! Charlie Crawford ain't with you anymore.
It turns into a standoff, which gets so out of hand that the army shows up, and Yen's son runs off to be with Doc, and then it's decided to burn them all out of the building. I must say, the climax where they all escape, while shot nicely and stylized, is a bit disappointing considering we had a much better gunfight at Blazer's Mills earlier in the movie. They do some cool slow-mo as Billy gets thrown out of the window in a chest and bursts out, guns blazing. Charlie and Dirty Steve get killed, but Charlie takes out Pat Kinney on his way out, which isn't what happened in real life. Billy, Chavez, Doc, and Jensen get away, but Billy decides to come back and get his revenge for Tunstall on Murphy. And yes, this isn't what happened at all. Let's just say Murphy did die a few months later from cancer, and the battle was a lot less ratioed. The McSween posse, which included the regulators, had like 50 or 60 people. This whole ending sequence is very simplified compared to what actually happened, and for some reason the military decides to shoot an unarmed man to death with a Gatling gun, and he doesn't bleed at all. Apparently this was actually supposed to be like RoboCop levels of bloody, but they didn't want the movie getting an X rating, so you just see him sitting there with the fucking SNES Mortal Kombat dust coming out of him. It all ends with the narrator, who I think is Chavez, as played by Lou Diamond Phillips, explaining what happened to everyone. Doc moved to New York with Yen's son, Chavez moved out to California, and Billy the Kid was shot dead by Pat Garrett. The arc words "pals" comes into play when it's chiseled onto Billy's tombstone. Young Guns is certainly more on the fiction side when it comes to a western based on a true story type movie. It does get some things right, but the context in which these things are portrayed is mostly fictional, which is fine. You're making a summer action movie, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, so I guess I could say that Young Guns is tastefully inaccurate. Considering most of what we know about the Old West outside of stuff that is in legal documents is usually some sort of hearsay or conjecture based on old gunslinger stories, I think it's okay that they kind of went a little creative on it to make it flow better as an action movie. And when all is said and done, I fucking love this movie. All the things about it are wrong. Using teen heartthrob actors from the Brat Pack, wrong. The soundtrack, a jazzy synth soundtrack with some guitars in it, wrong. A done-to-death concept with westerns, all wrong, but somehow brought together, they fucking work on the highest level. Emilio Estevez is the first person I picture when somebody brings up Billy the Kid. Lou Diamond Phillips, Charlie Sheen, and the rest are good, but Emilio really steals the show here. He's a psycho, but he's fun to watch. You find yourself rooting for him despite being pretty reprehensible, and that takes a lot of fucking skill to pull off on the parts of both the director, the writers, and Estevez himself. Other than that, the story gels cohesively, the action is exciting, and my god, that soundtrack. If you like western movies, or action movies, or the 80s, or all of the above, check it out. It's a good rainy day watch. It takes itself seriously enough, but it doesn't lack in the fun department either. Despite being inaccurate and using a lot of artistic license, Young Guns is sadly considered to be one of the more faithful depictions of the real-life story of Billy the Kid, which, Jesus Christ, how inaccurate were the other film adaptations? I really want Hollywood to do a big-budget, Oscar-bait picture that tells as much of the true story of Billy the Kid as can be confirmed. I know there's that other series, but it's on a weird streaming service I've never heard of, so it's probably shit. Let's get a 3-hour epic about the life of one of the most notorious Old West figures in American history. Young Guns was not well received by critics, it was considered dumb and stupid, whatever, but it brought in $55 million against an $11 million budget and was popular with audiences. This was all enough to warrant a sequel, and the sequel is, let's just say, at least in my opinion, really fucking shitty. It's a much worse movie for a lot of reasons, but that's for another video. If you want to see my channel grow, make sure to like this video, but only if you enjoyed it. If you hated it, I guess thumb it down, but yeah, please don't, or do. I don't give a fuck. You know what? Fucking do it.
My flower. And I'm her.